The early struggles. Joe Biden was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania in 1942, into a working-class family. His father, Joseph Sr., struggled to find stable work, and his mother, Catherine, was a strong, nurturing figure who taught him the values of hard work and resilience. The Biden family, although loving, faced financial hardships, and young Joe quickly learned the weight of responsibility. In a house where every dollar mattered, he understood that nothing in life was handed to you. From an early age, Joe encountered a significant personal challenge that would shape much of his character: a severe stutter. The stutter was not just a speech impediment, it was a barrier between him and the world. At school he was bullied by classmates, mocked for his inability to speak clearly. The young Joe became introverted, retreating into himself to avoid further humiliation. But instead of allowing his condition to define him, he sought ways to overcome it. He spent hours practicing speeches in front of a mirror, reading poetry aloud, and forcing himself to face the fear of speaking. His battle with stuttering became a silent fight that fueled his inner drive. As Joe struggled with his speech, his family provided him with unwavering support, especially his mother. Catherine Biden's belief in his abilities was unshakable. She would often say to him, "Joe, you can do anything you set your mind to." Those words became the cornerstone of his character, a constant reminder that the path to success was built on persistence, not perfection. However, it wasn't just his speech that would test him. When Joe was in his late 20s, tragedy struck. On Christmas Eve in 1972, a devastating car accident took the lives of his first wife, Nylia, and their one-year-old daughter, Naomi. Joe, who had just been elected to the U.S. Senate, was suddenly thrust into a world of unimaginable grief. In an instant, everything he had worked for, his political career, his dreams, his future, was overshadowed by loss. He later admitted that in those dark days he thought about giving up on everything. The weight of his responsibilities as a single father to his two surviving sons was almost too much to bear. But Joe Biden, even at his lowest, was not one to surrender. He found strength in his sons, Hunter and Beau, who depended on him. His grief, though consuming, did not break him. Instead, it became the fuel for his determination. He continued to serve in the Senate, dedicating himself to public service while navigating the painful journey of raising his children alone. In those early years of hardship, Joe Biden began to craft the resilience and empathy that would later define his career. His struggle, both personal and public, laid the foundation for what was to come. Through it all, Joe Biden learned the power of resilience and the importance of human connection. It was clear that his journey was just beginning, but the lessons he had learned in the face of adversity would shape every step he took moving forward. This was a man forged in the fires of loss and struggle, a man who would rise again, determined not just to survive but to serve. Political rise and setbacks. With the pain of personal loss still fresh, Joe Biden returned to the Senate in 1973, where his resolve was tested anew. The Senate, a place of power and prestige, felt like a distant world from the grief-stricken man he had been just months earlier. But Biden was determined to honor the memory of his late wife and daughter, as well as the sacrifices his family had made for him to be where he was. His early years in the Senate were marked by an overwhelming sense of duty. At just 30, he was the sixth youngest person to ever serve in the Senate, and he brought with him a fervent desire to change the world. Yet, despite his deep conviction, the road ahead was far from easy. Biden's initial foray into politics was fraught with personal and political obstacles. In his early days as a senator, he faced the struggle of finding his voice in a room filled with seasoned political giants. But what he lacked in experience he made up for with passion and a determination to push for change. He quickly became known for his staunch stance on issues such as civil rights, foreign policy, and social justice, gaining respect for his youthful energy and unwavering commitment to his ideals. By 1988, Biden's political career appeared to be on the verge of greatness. He decided to run for president, energized by a vision for a more just and united America. He was a man with everything to prove, and his charisma won him early praise. His speeches were captivating, his ideas fresh, and his political star seemed to be rising fast. But just as quickly as it had begun, his campaign was dealt a crushing blow. In the summer of 1987, news broke that Biden had plagiarized parts of a speech from a British politician. The scandal, fueled by media frenzy, forced him to withdraw from the race. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Biden, who had prided himself on honesty and integrity, was devastated. The weight of public shame seemed unbearable. For a man who had risen from the ashes of personal tragedy, this professional defeat was almost more than he could handle. His political career, once brimming with promise, was now in jeopardy. In private, Biden questioned his future in politics. Was this the end of his journey? Had he failed not only himself but also the people who believed in him? But Joe Biden was not a man to stay down for long. In the months that followed, he quietly retreated from the public eye, regrouping. He spent time with his family, focused on rebuilding his personal and professional life. Slowly, he regained his footing, learning from the experience rather than letting it define him. He returned to the Senate with a renewed sense of purpose, more determined than ever to serve the people who had elected him. Biden's resilience once again shone through. The scandal that could have ended his career became just another obstacle in a life full of them. It was during this time that Biden's ability to endure and adapt, in the face of both personal and political failure, solidified his reputation as a fighter. His belief in his purpose remained unshaken, and though his path was not always clear, he knew one thing for certain. He was not done yet. His story was far from over. The political setbacks only set the stage for the next chapter. A legacy of public service. By the time Joe Biden became vice president under Barack Obama in 2009, his decades of experience in the Senate had shaped him into one of the most respected political figures in America. But this new role, working alongside a charismatic and dynamic president, was a different kind of challenge. While Obama was the visionary, Biden was the steady hand, the bridge between the idealistic aspirations of the younger generation and the realities of Washington's entrenched politics. Together they made an unlikely but powerful pair. Biden's transition from senator to vice president was not an easy one. He had spent over 3 decades building a reputation in the Senate, cultivating deep relationships with members of both parties. Now, as vice president, his role was more about supporting Obama's agenda than forging his own. At first, Biden struggled to adjust to the new dynamic. He was used to being a decision-maker, but now he had to find his place in the shadows, offering counsel and support rather than taking the spotlight. Despite this, Biden quickly found his rhythm, particularly in foreign policy. His deep knowledge of international relations, honed over years of service, made him an invaluable asset to the administration. He was entrusted with key diplomatic missions, including overseeing the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Iraq and strengthening relationships with NATO allies. His efforts helped restore America's standing on the world stage after years of international tension. But it wasn't just on the global front where Biden made his mark. At home, he became the administration's point person on key domestic issues, including healthcare reform. The Affordable Care Act, one of the Obama administration's most significant achievements, would not have passed without Biden's tireless work behind the scenes. His experience in navigating the intricacies of Washington politics, along with his ability to connect with senators across party lines, played a pivotal role in securing the votes necessary to make the landmark legislation a reality. However, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Despite his political skill, Biden's personal life would soon be touched by tragedy once again. In 2015, his son, Beau Biden, died after a battle with brain cancer. The loss of Beau, a promising politician in his own right, devastated Joe in ways that were difficult to put into words. The grief was all-consuming, but it also deepened his empathy and commitment to public service. Beau's death became a driving force for Joe's work on the Cancer Moonshot Initiative, a national effort to accelerate cancer research and treatment. In this deeply personal mission, Biden sought to honor his son's legacy and offer hope to others facing the same struggles. By the end of Obama's second term, Joe Biden had become a figure whose personal and political lives were intertwined. His legacy, shaped by his decades of service and the emotional toll of his personal losses, stood as a testament to resilience, empathy, and unwavering dedication to the American people. But as the clock ticked on his time as vice president, there remained a question that had long lingered. What would Joe Biden's next chapter be? His journey was far from finished, and the stage was set for what would come next. Presidency in the future. When Joe Biden was elected the 46th President of the United States in 2020, the nation was on the edge of a new era. The years leading up to his inauguration had been marked by political polarization, a global pandemic, and civil unrest. The country was deeply divided, and the weight of this division rested heavily on Biden's shoulders. His victory, earned after a bruising and contentious election, promised to bring a sense of healing, unity, and renewal. Yet, as Biden stood at the helm of a fractured nation, it was clear that the path ahead would not be easy. Biden's presidency began under the shadow of the COVID-19 pandemic. The virus had ravaged the country, and the nation was desperate for leadership that could restore stability. The American people had voted for a man they believed could bring back normalcy, and in his first days in office, Biden made it clear that tackling the pandemic would be his foremost priority. His administration rolled out an ambitious vaccine distribution plan, working tirelessly to get shots into the arms of millions. Biden's calm, empathetic approach was a stark contrast to the chaos that had defined the previous administration. His leadership style, steady, compassionate, and rooted in his belief in science and public health, helped to restore a sense of direction in a time of crisis. But the pandemic was only one of the monumental challenges facing Biden. The racial justice movement, sparked by the deaths of George Floyd and other Black Americans, had ignited protests across the nation. Biden, a man who had spent decades fighting for civil rights, knew that addressing racial inequality would be central to his presidency. He called for police reform, championed the expansion of voting rights, and pushed for legislation that would address systemic racism. Yet, as always, the realities of Washington politics reared their head. His proposals often stalled in a divided Congress, and the country remained deeply split on many of the issues he championed. Alongside these domestic struggles, Biden's foreign policy agenda faced its own hurdles. The decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan, a conflict that had dragged on for 2 decades, was met with both praise and criticism. The chaotic evacuation, marked by images of desperate Afghans clinging to military planes, left a stain on the administration's credibility. Biden, however, stood by his decision, convinced that the U.S. needed to end its involvement in a war that had no clear resolution. This decision, emblematic of his pragmatic approach, further highlighted his leadership style, decisive even when the outcome was uncertain. Amid these challenges, Biden's leadership was tested in ways he had never experienced before. At 78, he was the oldest